Hello, everybody, and welcome back to ZakIsCinema. If you find yourself just finishing a movie, maybe going off to the movies and just having nobody to talk to about what you just experienced and all your thoughts and feelings surrounding it, well, look at you, buddy. You and me are in the same boat. So yes, well, now you can't say that anymore because now you have somebody to talk to about this. Yes, you're welcome, and you're always welcomed here, of course. Today we're going to be doing another movie review, so let's just hop right into it. Today we're going to be reviewing and discussing the new movie called 28 Years Later. For director, we got Danny Boyle, and for writer, we got Alex Garland. Starring in the movie, we got Jodie Comer, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Alfie Williams. So the story for the movie picks up nearly 3 decades after the rage virus devastated Britain. A father and son leave their fortified island sanctuary to journey across the infected, ravaged mainland in search of answers. So as we hop into the review for 28 Years Later, we've been covering all of the other 28 Later movies, so I do have reviews for weeks and days later if you're interested in more of my in-depth thoughts on both of those. But obviously leading up to this one had to be probably my most anticipated movie of the year, just because I felt like they've been talking about doing another sequel or something in this universe, and when we finally got that trailer, I easily think that is one of the best trailers I've ever seen, at least in recent memory, so that only heightened my anticipation even more for this movie here. The 28 Later movies, they easily have my favorite adaptation of zombies, or in this case, infected humans, so that only added to my anticipation for this new one, just because I felt like there was so much more that they could really do, and, jump in, time and now decades with this one. I was just so excited to see how different this would feel, how new this would feel compared to our other two. So yeah, I was obviously very excited, had a lot of high hopes for this movie. So yes, we are going to be jumping into the review section now, but just a fair warning, we are doing spoilers for this, not for the whole movie, just for my, positives, mix and negatives. I want to go a little bit more in depth with this just because I have a lot of thoughts as we'll get into here. So spoilers here for 28 Years Later. Yeah, let's jump into the positives, or just the things that I really enjoyed about this movie. So first, I think this movie continues on the positive track record of our other two, where this movie just feels so different than your normal zombie infected movie. I mean, it's no secret that this zombie, apocalypse world has been so overly saturated just with TV shows, movies, everything like that. This genre, I feel like, has been done to death. Even with the second one and my issues with it feeling a little bit more cliche, it still feels like an elevated version of that type of story. And I feel like Garland and director Danny Boyle continue on with this new installment just feeling so different. Like, you're not going to get a zombie movie experience like you will with these 28 Later movies. And I think this movie does a fantastic job with just sticking out so well. In this movie, instead of following a small group of survivors like we did with the first one, or government community like we did in the second one, we follow a small family and a small isolated island community on this really cool and interesting island, where this island and some of the surrounding lands around it, I believe, have been quarantined by the rest of the world. So the rest of the world is kind of moving on, has moved on, is enjoying their everyday lives, and everyone's just kind of come to the same thought that, well, like, okay, the infected's over there, that everyone stay there and you're off to fend for yourself. So it creates a new dynamic following this community. Like, you follow communities and survivors all the time in zombie apocalypse movies, but this one, it feels a little bit different because they are very much just on their own and nobody is coming to help them. In this movie, similar to the second one, I think the family dynamic is a huge positive and very well done. We follow a father and son. The son is named Spike and the father's name is Jamie. And Jamie and Spike, they also have, Spike has their mother, Jamie has his wife with Isla, and Spike and Jamie, especially at the start, have this very nice relationship where Jamie, he sees a lot of potential in his son and is almost maybe blinded by that and pushing him to kind of man up a little bit, because the movie kind of starts off with them going out to the mainlands, and before they go, it's very clearly stated that they don't really recommend this until the kid is like 14, 15, like right around that age. And I believe Spike in this movie just turned 12. So you got this like underdog story, this interesting father and son family dynamic, and this interesting community all culminating right at the beginning, which I like. And on top of that, there's something interesting going on with Spike's mother, or Jamie's wife, Isla, where she is at home and at the start with this undiagnosed disease or mental health disorder that makes her unable to truly process and comprehend what is really going on around her. Like, she kind of knows, but then her memory fades and she might think it's like normal everyday life before the apocalypse, but then she thinks it's normal everyday apocalypse life, and then sometimes she's a little bit more fantastical with her thinking or just irrational and not making a lot of sense, and a lot of that comes out with anger towards her husband. So it's very interesting seeing this family try to work together when they all have different things going on. So I loved how this movie started off here. And like I said, I enjoyed the father and son relationship and seeing how both of them are trying to handle their mother's, Jamie's wife, but Spike's mother's medical concerns that are going on. The father in this movie is trying to make him handle it like how he does, like just kind of, ignoring it a little bit, not drawing too much attention, just trying to like manage it. But then as the movie goes on, Spike really wants to actually do something to help his mother. So it's interesting seeing how they go a little bit different handling it here. And then it adds another layer of tension when you find out this island doesn't really have a doctor, or at least not currently. And there's a fantastic scene in this movie that really, really stuck out to me, is when I'm going to be kind of hopping around a little bit. I realize that when I'm talking, but Spike and his father, they go out, they have their first little adventure, they come back throwing a party for Spike's big adventure here, which again just adds a lot to that community aspect that I always appreciate in really any movie. And Spike then finds out by another relative, or I think he's just part of the community there, that there is this like crazy doctor that used to be a doctor before the apocalypse, and he's out living in the woods. And then that starts to create some distrust between Spike and his father, because his father explained that there was no doctors. And Spike's left here like, my mom needs a doctor. Like, why wouldn't you mention this? Like, why wouldn't you be trying to do everything you can to help out your wife or my mother in this case scenario? And it just leads to a really cool dynamic where there's some mistrust and tension that's coming not only just from the zombies, but from inside this community and inside this family as well. But then when Spike finds this out and like confronts his dad the next day, they're fighting in the hallway. Spike's telling him to get away from him and his mother because he's just like so upset, and he's a young kid, so he might not fully understand yet, and his dad's not giving him all the information. And you can tell they're about to get in this heated argument, maybe where they start getting physical with each other, but the dad just kind of drops it, realizes he may have fucked up a little bit, and when he's walking down the stairs, he just like, Aaron Taylor Johnson in this movie did a really great job. I wish he was in it more, but as he's walking down the stairs, he just like has to let his frustration out and like punches the ceiling above him, just two quick punches that fuck up all the drywall there. And I thought that scene said so much without saying anything at all. So that scene really stood out to me, added more to the dad character, and added more to this family dynamic that was really great. And speaking of Spike and the family dynamic, I think the actor that portrays Spike does a fantastic job. A lot more than I thought. This movie really relies on him, especially when you jump to the second half of the movie, where he's asked to carry this movie pretty much, and he does great in the emotional scenes, the action scenes, and I think he's just a really interesting, great character in this movie. So I was so happy seeing that he really lived up to carrying this big movie here. And I know I've kind of hinted at it, but I really do think the first half of this movie was like, it easily started off as like a 4-5 star film for me. It was just absolutely incredible, where I was so locked in and engrossed with this world, loved where they were living, the community. They add a lot to that community aspect, especially with that party that they throw Spike, and just these group of survivors that are really just all left on their own from everybody in the world. So it creates an underdog story with our character of Spike and his family, but also just the community as a whole too, which is very interesting. And I know there was some articles and stuff like released of how they shot some segments of the movie with, I think, like, what was it, like 20, 25 iPhones to capture some shots. And I loved the style choice that they used. I'll see if I can find a picture of it, but they put them on this like big metal rig all lined up in like a semicircle with two people hanging onto it. And it's going to be difficult to explain unless you've seen the movie, but when like Spike or his father Jamie's like shooting an arrow, or I guess any of the characters, and you get that like penetrating shot, as soon as it like penetrates, it like freeze frames, but then like jumps to different camera angles and then finishes the blood splatter or finishes the arrow shot on that last iPhone that it's capturing. So you get this like freeze frame gore effect, and then it jumps angles and then finishes it. So it's just like, I saw some people saying it was like unnecessary and like, oh, that's all it was for. I'm like, well, that adds such a cool stylistic choice, because like you could show someone this scene and then you're instantly, you know where that movie is from. I know who directed it because of that stylistic choice, and I've never seen anything like it. And I feel like in action and zombie movies, you kind of gotta spice it up just a little bit, even if it's something kind of simple with that, with just showing multiple different camera angles. I don't know. I loved that, and I am glad they didn't like overdo it, but they didn't underutilize it, if that makes sense. So I was a big fan of that. And then, like I said, kind of jumping around here, but like especially in that first scene when Jamie and his son Spike venture off to the mainland, and we kind of get to see some of our cool zombie carnage here. And I like how it's filmed so similar. You got these wide angle lenses at some point, some with like that fishbowl effect. It looked like they used a lot of natural lighting, which I really loved. Remind me of scenes that were shot in like The Revenant, for example. So I really did like that. And I like how they introduced cool new zombie lore, because now it's been a couple decades. These zombies are kind of evolving, and there is alpha zombies where they're a little bit bigger down below too. If you've seen the movie, we might even get into it here, but it's just interesting seeing how these bigger alpha zombies kind of take control of like little herds and communities of their own. So I thought that was really interesting. They introduced these bigger fat zombies that are so big that they can't walk around, so they're slow crawling through the woods, and that's like the very first scene we get when they venture out into the mainland off of their island here. And I thought that was really awesome. And like I said, with the alpha zombie, his dick is big. Okay, let's just clear that up. A little goofy, maybe they could have toned that down, but at the same time, it's the alpha zombie. But either way, I really did like, I'm going to say it, ZakIsCinema like the naked zombies here. I did. At first, I'm like, oh God, that's kind of, I don't know. But then, it's 28 years later, so obviously any clothing these humans were once wearing would deteriorate and fall off and everything. So I thought it made a lot of sense, and it's a small detail that's kind of interesting. And again, you don't see a lot of zombie stuff really do that. I feel like any zombie thing, I've always seen them like fully clothed. Now, I'm not advocating for more naked zombies. I didn't mind that they did that, and I thought it was interesting. And like I said, I think they do a really great job at expanding the world outside the UK here, which you expect in this bigger budget sequel, and being it almost 3 decades after Infection had started. And they do this in the beginning with some lines of text, like I explained earlier, but they also kind of hone this in with the character of Eric, who I thought was awesome. He's a Swedish NATO soldier that had his patrol boat sink, and all his other characters or patrol people got killed off here, and Eric kind of further explains that the rest of the world is pretty normal. Like Eric comes with like a cell phone, wearing technology, modern gear and everything, and explains that the NATO troops do their best to kind of patrol and keep the infection from spreading, because your island, you're the native people that are you're in quarantine here. Don't mess with us. We're keeping the infection over here. Again, you guys are on your own. And he even explained that nobody's coming for him either, which is just so interesting and kind of fleshes out the world without having to derail from our main story all that much too. And I think on top of that, it's just interesting seeing a zombie apocalypse movie that doesn't consume the entire world. Like the whole world isn't dealing with this whole issue. It's kind of been like, I feel like that's what would happen in a more manageable zombie apocalypse, especially with our modern technology. Like hopefully we'd find a way to kind of contain it to the best of our ability. So I like that detail here and the world building that they did throughout. And lastly here, I know this is part of a planned trilogy, and I'll address that in my mixed and negatives here, but I have my issues with the ending. I definitely do, but I still appreciate how it wraps up this main story so well, and then leaves enough dangling plot threads where you can see them expanding for 1 to 2 more movies, in this case 2, since they have a trilogy already planned. So I'm definitely going to check out the second part here. So for my next section here, I'm kind of combining my mixed and negative, mostly because more of my mixed ones were leaning more towards mixed negative, and then I really just had like one major negative, but I all felt like even with my major negative, I'm still kind of like mixed on it. It's still so fresh and new, and I definitely have to rewatch this movie again, and I feel like a lot of these points are gonna maybe stay true, get worse, get better, depending on how this trilogy plays out here. So I feel like I can't say for certain which is very negative and which is just a mix for right now. So I hope I kind of explained that right, but this is going to be my mixed and negative section here. So unfortunately, I am going to have to put that opening scene in here. When the movie starts, it leads into this amazing opening scene where you get you saw it in the trailer, got a bunch of these kids watching Teletubbies, and then their home just all goes to shit, and they don't show it. I think they do it in a tasteful way, but that whole room of kids gets taken out by the infected when one kid runs away. I forget the name. I forget the name of it, but that one kid gets out, but he's like running and sees his whole family get decimated and his community get decimated. And then he runs to the church where there's fathers just like praying. And it almost kind of hints at, well, maybe the father, like he says this is the rapture. So I'm like wondering if he kind of orchestrated this, or he's definitely not doing anything to help anybody here. So I thought that was interesting, and it leads him off. And yeah, I thought that opening, I'm like, holy shit, that might be one of the better openings of all 3 of these movies here. But I have to put it in my mix because I believe the character is named Jimmy, the little kid in the beginning that escapes this community disaster here. And that opening is so disconnected from the rest of the movie. As soon as you get that opening, it jumps into our island with Spike, Jamie, and Isla, and it follows them. And at first I guess I thought the little boy was the dad's character of Jamie, but Jimmy here actually shows up in the last 2 minutes. So that I hate when openings do that. They're just like so disconnected. I believe Evil Dead Rise kind of had a janky, disconnected opening. Like even though the opening's really good, it has nothing to do with this story really. And it's kind of leading into one of my bigger negatives that I'm sure a lot of people are going to be complaining about. But at the ending, Jimmy now, and you could tell by the cross he's wearing, it's the one that he got from the beginning from his dad. He shows up in just one of the goofiest things I have ever seen in my life. Just one of the weirdest tonal shifts I've ever experienced in a movie. He shows up to save Spike, and him and his crew are wearing these like colorful Reebok Adidas jumpsuits, all in different colors, all with like different weapons, and all with like rings on, chains on. Just so wild and out there. I turned to my friend after the movie and told him it reminded me of like Power Rangers that were also cheesy drug dealers. Like, that's the best I can describe it. And I guess I like the idea of it. Like, it makes sense to kind of have a different community that's so vastly different from the characters that we've been following. Like, it would make sense that people are so different. But the way that they handle this is just, it crosses that line where it's too fucking much. It's too much. Like, as soon as they showed up, I was like, oh my God, are they playing the wrong movie right now? Like, at the ending, the last 2 minutes. And it's just like the way that they like save Spike and do all these like fancy like twirls and flips to defeat the zombies. It's just like, guys, this is too much. I have no idea what they were thinking. I fucking hated it. And the reason why I'm kind of keeping this in my like mixed negative is because I know it kind of sets up the next part. So maybe they can fix those characters. But at this point, I wouldn't even be mad if they completely ignored that and literally just hard shifted and overcorrected and was like, okay, we're going to tone these characters down for the second part. They're going to be the same characters, but they're not going to be wearing their colorful jump suits or some shit. Like, if they did that, I'd totally forgive. It would still bother me in this movie, but I'd be totally fine with it. With that continuity error, I'd be like, no worries. You realized your mistake. You corrected it. Like, even if they wanted to reshoot that last scene for the Blu-ray, I really think they should, because I did not like that. And especially with it being a really good movie and leaving off on that note, it left me just disappointed, even though it's in those last like 2 minutes here. So I hated that, really did. And just like with the other two movies, how I talked a lot about how halfway through both of those movies kind of change over. They change the tone, they change the story and what they're doing. And in this movie, the first half is very much that father and son adventure that I was kind of expecting. However, halfway through, Spike sees his father cheat on his mother at that welcoming home party, and then, learns about the doctor with Dr. Kelson, I believe it is, and finds out that his father has a history with this crazy doctor, but Spike doesn't really understand why his dad still won't take him to see his mom, his wife, and it leads to that great fight that we were talking about. And then after that, Spike ends up sneaking out his mother to go take her. I did really enjoy that because this is a 12-year-old, just turned 12, finally getting a taste of freedom here, so it makes sense he would do something that seems so stupid, but he's doing it with the right intentions, but he's just not thinking through about how risky and kind of stupid it is. So I did like it because he wants to save his mother and he's going to do anything he can to even get a chance at that. However, I'm just not sure how I feel about what they do with it. Once they go find Dr. Kelson, it gets a little kind of goofy, a little cheesy with his character. I did like him at the bone temple where he kind of burns the bodies and stacks up all these skulls to preserve humanity in his own justified way here. And again, they do something interesting with the zombie genre about introducing characters that take the movie a little bit deeper here. However, the doctor here gives his mom the diagnosis of cancer and then says that he doesn't have any, diagnostic equipment here, so he can't be for sure, but if he had to make his best guess, it would be cancer. And then Spike starts freaking out because there's nothing that they can do, and then all of a sudden, without saying a word, they just shoot him with morphine and then take the mom and kill her. And again, I don't hate the decision of killing off the mom because I think it's very emotional, adds a lot to the character of Spike. It just kind of felt so weird and rushed to me. And I think it would have been more interesting maybe if Spike had to maybe leave her with the doctor so she could kind of rest peacefully. They had a goodbye moment, rest peacefully until you pass away. This is going to be much better than at home, but Spike has to go. He has to go find himself or something. And then, maybe the dad finds out about it and then has to decide do I go see my wife? Is she even alive? Or do I have to go save Spike? Where's Spike? It would have led, I think, to a more interesting plot point for our our second movie. Even if they didn't want to do that, I think my biggest issue with this is just how quick the mother changes and accepts dying from a man she's never met before. Like, as soon as she gets to the doctor, all throughout the movie, she's been like changing her mood and everything, because obviously now we find out she has brain cancer. But then when she gets there, she just kind of is acting like her normal self and just kind of accepts it. And I get she has cancer and is not thinking clearly, but I don't think they did a good job at showing us that. Like, they just kind of make her hard shift. If they were going to kill her that way, I think they needed a more emotional scene between her and Spike, like with her really just saying like, this is what I want. I knew I had cancer. Like, let me do this, Spike. But instead, they just kind of like shoot him up with morphine, and then the doctor takes her away. I'm like, you guys didn't even like talk about this. So it kind of ruins that emotional aspect to me, which is definitely very frustrating here. Lastly, here with my mixed negatives. Again, jumping around here. ZakIsCinema can't type notes very well, but that's okay. On the way to the doctor with that character of Eric, they come across a pregnant zombie giving birth, I believe, in a train. That leads to a cool scene with Alpha, but again, this is so interesting where, if you understand evolution, it would make sense that these zombies would do this because they're living and breathing creatures, so they need to find a way to survive and procreate. Just they do it in a goofy way by showing the pregnancy, and at one point the zombie like grips hands with Spike's mother, Isla, and is like gripping on and screaming during birth, where I'm like, oh god, maybe she's a real person, like maybe she just got some red paint all over her or something. But and they show her give birth and everything, and I'm just like, I don't know, that kind of came, and then like right after that the zombie's like back to normal zombie and tries to kill them, and I'm like, I don't know if that translates the best, because in these 28 later movies, they try to do this by showing how these infected zombies do have a little bit more humanity in them, but I don't think they show it properly, because even in, Weeks Later with the character of Dawn, about how when he's infected, he finds his kids, that I don't know, I thought wasn't handled maybe the best. Like with this, it's interesting seeing a pregnant zombie. I just thought it was goofy the way that she was like acting like a human for a second, and I'm like, well, like, so when they're pregnant, are they not really a zombie anymore until they give birth and then they're back to fighting humans? I wasn't a fan of that, and it kind of like took me out of it a little bit, if that makes sense here. Overall, I would say this is a really great and amazingly well done and well-made movie when it started. It truly exceeded a lot of my expectations here. However, as the film continued, I kind of felt my interest drifting and just frustrated with some of the decisions, and it truly didn't help that the ending was such a terrible shift, both story and tonal wise as well here. So for my rating for this movie is, again, I do need to rewatch this with the trilogy. It could make this better, it could make this worse, but if I had to rate this right now, I'd look to own this movie. However, I'd only really want to get it at, a discount. I don't know how I feel about paying full price for it just yet, but if they had like a box set, especially once the new trilogy is done, I'm 100% going to pay full price for that box set, even if the first two are the only ones I truly like love, if that makes sense. So I had a lot of specific negatives. That ending really just soured me, unfortunately, but we'll see what they do here. Not a bad movie at all, so I hope it didn't like come off like that. Just like very frustrating and baffling decisions here that almost kind of derailed the whole movie for me. But again, a movie I definitely rewatch here. So you guys have my spoiler-filled thoughts here on 28 Years Later. Let me know down below what you thought about 28 Years Later. What's your opinion on this franchise? Are you looking forward to the trilogy that they have planned here? Were your expectations met, or were you left disappointed with this newest installment? I'd love to hear all of that down below here, but I appreciate anybody watching my videos. It does mean a lot, so thanks again, and yeah, look forward to more ZakIsCinema coming very soon.